Okay, Unit 8, Lesson 84, Reproductive Strategies, Community Ecology, Part 1. See if we can get all this done in this class period. The first half of this lesson is about making sure that the species continues. And the best way to make sure the species continue is you have to do two things. First, you have to reproduce. You have to make more of your species. That's reproduction. But then you have to make sure that they reach adulthood and they are able to reproduce as well. So mating, which is basically a synonym for sex, is just making more offspring. It is a reproductive act. Whoops, that's a little too bulky letters. Mating is a reproductive act that allows sexually reproducing organisms pass on their genes. So you have offspring. Now what? Is that it? You just stop? You have a reproductive strategy. A reproductive strategy is how parents ensure their offspring reach adulthood. And a synonym for adulthood is sexual maturity, so they can actually reproduce too. Now, there's two basic strategies here, guys. Option A, you can overwhelm the environment with offspring. A few are likely to survive. Have you ever seen those nature videos of a sea turtle nest hatching and then all the babies start to make a mad scramble towards the water? There's a lot of danger that goes between the turtle nest and the edge of the water. And the predators out there know when the nest is about to hatch. I've seen videos where the seagulls are eating the baby turtles, buzzards are eating the baby turtles, crabs are eating the turtles, raccoons, you name it. But it's just basically you're flooding the zone with so many babies that you can't possibly stop them all. Let's say that I was standing at South Hall at the end, and all of you trying to make a dash to get out of South Hall. There's one of you, and there's 20, or there's 25 of you, and there's one of me. Am I going to stop some of you? Yeah. Can I stop 100% of you? Unlikely. So even though there's a lot of predators on the beach trying to eat all these little turtles, some of the turtles make it. They make it to the water, and then there's dangers in the water. There's big fish and other predators. Maybe less than 5% of the entire nest actually makes it to adulthood, but some of them did. Now, in this scenario, there's no parenting. None. A mama sea turtle drags her big body up on the beach, digs a hole, lays her eggs, gone forever. Never comes back. She never looks back. The other strategy that there is in nature is where parents produce very few offspring and raise them to adulthood. And obviously, there is parenting. Now, these strategies have names, and we're going to break them down right now. They're called R strategists and K strategists. And by the way, when I was grading your tests, um, when I make something capital, you make it capital. But when I make something lowercase, some of you are still making it capital. Like when I did 2PQ, that's how you're supposed to write it. Some of you wrote it like this. Don't do that. When I write Q squared, you're supposed to do this. Some of you did this. Don't do that. Okay? So that is the lowercase r on the left and a capital K on the right. Make sure you keep it consistent and you do what I do. I will tell you what R and K stand for in a little bit, but I want to give you a description of what qualifies as an R strategist, what qualifies as a K strategist. If you are an R strategist, you are able to withstand unstable resources. One day there is food, the next day there isn't. One day you have a home, the next day you don't. They are adaptable. So I kind of think of roaches. Roaches can tolerate a lot. Our strategists have many offspring. Queen ant can give birth to millions of ants over her life. But she doesn't sit there and read them bedtime stories. She's not a parent. They tend to have small bodies. So they have lots of offspring. Why don't they just cover all the land in the world? Well, they're very, very small for the most part. Think of ants. There is little to no parenting. Some parents will, if they're an egg layer, for example, they might guard the nest until the eggs hatch. And once the eggs hatch, it's like a switch goes off and they're gone. They were just meant to protect the eggs, and their paternal instinct goes away. They tend to have short lifespans. Some R strategists live 30 days. Some might live a year, maybe two if you're lucky. They don't live very long. And they mature rapidly. When we were learning about sex-linked traits, we talked about Thomas Hunt Morgan working with fruit flies. One of the reasons he works with fruit flies is because they grow up fast. You can have a fruit fly egg become a fully grown fruit fly in a week. They go from not even being born yet to being an adult in a week. You guys go from not even being born yet to an adult in 20, like a fully developed adult in 25 years. Your brain is fully developed when you're 25. So we're slow. Now, for case strategists, they're the exact opposite. They need stable resources because they're not adaptable. They produce few offspring. How many of you are a single child? So, Cohen, Adriano, Mackenzie, for your parents' entire life, how many times have they reproduced? Once. That's it. Others of you, twice maybe, three times maybe, but not a lot. There's some organisms that reproduce all the time. Some of them maybe a lot all at one time every year. It varies from species to species. They have large bodies. I'm thinking whales. You ever see a mama whale swimming? How many calves does she have? One, just one. You have parental care. A little baby I showed you earlier, that thing's helpless. Can't do anything on his own. And that's because he's not meant to. Not yet. They have long lifespans. And they have slow maturation. They grow up slowly. So here's basically the trade-off, guys. You can either you have energy, okay? Let's say that this little jar here, this water bottle is filled with energy. I can devote my energy to one of two things. I can't do both. You can either devote your energy towards having a ton of offspring, because that does take energy, and just let them figure it out. Or you can devote your energy towards raising them. You can't do both. You can't raise a ton of offspring. You either have a ton of offspring and don't be a parent, or you have very few offspring, maybe one, and you parent it. Parenting is a verb. You raise it, you take care of it. So you can't do both. So it's a trade-off. Now, I want to ask you all this. What type of strategist do you think a sea turtle is? R? Well, go through the list. I'm going to put a check mark. Kylie, tell me a R strategist trait that you think a sea turtle has. Many offspring, and those nests can have dozens of eggs. Anything else? Yep, mama lays her egg, she's gone. Anything else? Not really. That's it. Now, case strategist. Maggie, you have any ideas as to which case strategist qualities a sea turtle would have? Oh, yeah. There's some big sea turtles out there. Yep, they're not very adaptable, so they need stable resources. Anything else? Adriana? They live a long time if they don't get eaten by a shark or something. And they grow up slowly. So here's the point I'm making, you guys. You don't have to be all R or all K. You could be a little bit of both. Look at this diagram here. Now, an oyster is like a hard R strategist, no doubt about it. A chimpanzee is no doubt about it being a K strategist. But as you get here in the middle, you could be a little bit of both. You don't have to be one or the other. And a sea turtle is a great example of that. A sea turtle is mostly K with some R. You could be mostly R with some K. You could be 50-50. It's not all or nothing. That's why I want to make sure you guys understand. I mean, look at that, 500 million a year. Okay, let's move on. Now, I want to tell you what R and K stand for, so I'm going to help describe that to you in this chart. This is going to be a population growth curve. Now, this graph is kind of coming out of nowhere. We just talked about reproductive strategies. Now I'm talking about a population growth curve, because in this graph, you'll learn what R and K stand for. That's why I'm doing it. Now, I do want to tell you that as we are just 55 days from your AP exam, that you will be seeing more graphs associated with Unit 8 than you will with any other unit. So it's important that you know how to read an XY axis, whether it be a line graph or a bar graph or whatever. Now, on the AP exam, you will have to make a graph. I'm not telling you it's an if. It is, you will. And one part you must do is you must correctly label your X and Y axes. And I've done that. Now, look at the X axis. It's measured in time. But I indicated in parentheses what unit of time I'm using. If I just put time, that's open up for interpretation. Minutes, years, days, I didn't say. But here I actually did. I put years. So make sure you do that. And I'll be talking more about that. The y-axis is your population size, which is represented by the letter N. Okay? So here we go. This is your population so far. Now, over time, what does it appear that this population is doing? Is it growing? Is it dropping? Or is it staying stagnant? It's growing. Now, we call this a J curve because if you use your imagination, it looks like a letter J. This portion is called your exponential growth curve. It's just growing unlimitedly. This is exponential. This has a very high growth rate, which we call R. That's your growth rate. And the R in R strategist basically means grow. Grow, baby, grow. Just have as many offspring, many individuals as you can. Right now, the growth rate is pretty high. I mean, it's going straight up. However, every ecosystem has that ceiling, so to speak, which is the maximum number of individuals that an ecosystem can support. You know what you call this? A carrying capacity. Another word for carrying capacity, guys, is limits. And guess what letter in ecology in graphs like this represent limits? K. K is for carrying capacity. A carrying capacity is the maximum number of individuals that an ecosystem can support. My classroom has 36 seats. That is my carrying capacity, 36 students. At the beginning of the year, they had a class with me teaching 38. I said, no, can't do. Unless you want two kids sitting on the floor, can't do it. So they changed the schedule a little bit. Now, what would happen if your population exceeded the carrying capacity? What will happen to the trend? It's going to go down. So how would you describe, or let me ask you first, right here, what's greater, birth rate or death rate? All right. What's greater here, birth rate or death rate? The death rate. And the death rate will continue to go up until you get below the carrying capacity. And the population size will eventually establish an equilibrium with the carrying capacity. However, the carrying capacity can be a moving target. What if this is a forest and half the forest burns down? Your new carrying capacity is down here. What will the population size have to do in response? It'll have to drop. You're going to see deaths. And now it's going to be rebalanced. But let's say that the forest grows back bigger and better than ever, and here is your new carrying capacity, even higher than it was before. Eventually, what will the population do in response? It's going to go up. So all populations develop an equilibrium with their environment. You don't take too much. You take just what you need. And if you do take too much, you're going to eventually run out and you're going to die. That's why there is this area here. But naturally, life forms create an equilibrium with their environment. So the moral of this story here is that K strategist comes from limits, and an R strategist comes from R, which means growth. You just make more, make more, make more. Grow, 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 grow. Flood the zone. All right. Let's move on to survivorship curves. I'll give you a moment to jot down that. This does have to do with R strategists and K strategists. Be sure that you correctly label your X-axis and your Y-axis. Give you a moment to do that. The Y-axis is the percent of the population from 0%, where everything's dead, to 100%, everything is alive. The X-axis is your lifespan, from birth all the way to as long a life as you could live, your death. You weren't eaten by a shark or struck by lightning. You just lived a long, full life. You just died of natural causes, as long as your species can live. Whether that's a month or a day or 100 years, every species is different. You know, humans can live from typically 80 to 100, while most dogs live 10. So everything's different. Okay. There are three curves here, guys, and I'm going to draw them in this order. 1, 3, 2. I'll say that again. 1, 3, 2. There's a reason I'm going in that order. Do not confuse 2 with 3. We're going 1, 3, 2. Here's the first one. This is survivorship curve, Roman numeral 1. Once you're done writing, I'm going to tell you what trend I notice and actually see if you can pick it up. Charlie Nash, I'm coming to you. Charlie, I want you to compare the red curve to the X and Y axis. Around what point of their life do you eventually start to begin to see some death? So how in the world did they survive the first half of their lives? I thank you, Charlie. What kept them alive? What gave them food and what helped them survive? Their parents or their like parents? Their parents. Okay. How are you alive right now? Did you just pop out of the womb and say, hey, give me a job, I can do it on my own? No, your parents you were utterly and completely dependent on your parents. They kept you alive at this point. They did a good job. This is survivorship curve 1. The majority of individuals Survive early life. Death is predominantly after the halfway point. Tell your audience again here, Charlie, what kept them alive for the first half of their life at least? Their parents. So is this more in tune with an R strategy or a K strategy? K. This is more indicative of K strategists, which means there was parenting that kept them alive. Okay, next one. Sophia Dyke is coming to you for this one. Here we go. This is survivorship curve 3. Sophia, when did the majority of individuals die? At the start of their life. So what didn't they have? No parents involved. Every little turtle for himself. So in this survivorship curve, the majority of individuals die shortly after birth. Those that survive live full lives. Next time you see a turtle, have some appreciation because they went through a lot just to get to that point of their life. If they do survive the first few moments of their life, odds are they'll live a full life. But man, those first few moments is a death race. Not a lot get out. This is more indicative of our strategists. Okay. And now we'll do 2. There's survivorship curve 2. Leo, as they get older, what happens to the percentage of the population? It goes down just at a steady rate. This simply means that as you get older, your chance of death increases. There's no correlation. So in survivorship curve 2, there's no correlation between age, lifespan, and death. Okay. All right. Are there any questions on an R strategist, a K strategist, in any of the 3 survivorship curves? You good, Charlie? You got all this? You ready for your pop quiz tomorrow? Oops. You're not going to get a quiz. There's no quiz. There's nothing tomorrow. All right. Community ecology, part 1. Here we go. Part 2 is going to be on next class, Thursday. This is just some vocab terms, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay. A community. What is a community made of? If you remember your hierarchy from our first day notes for ecology, it goes organism, then blank, then population. A population is just multiple blanks. What is it? I'm sorry. A community, I gave it away. A community is multiple what? Populations. Oops. So this is multiple populations, like a pride of lions, a herd of elephants, a troop of baboons. They're all in the same place at the same time. You do not consider the abiotic factors here. Okay, continue with the theme of community. When you have a pride of lions, a troop of baboons, a herd of elephants, the community structure is the number of species you have in the community and how many individuals in each population. Does your pride of lions has 12 lions. Your herd of elephants has 30 elephants. Your troop of baboons has 50 baboons. It just is telling you how many of each species is in the population. That tells you the overall community structure. Next, we have species diversity, also called biodiversity. This is about how many different kinds of life forms there are. The number of species and the abundance of each species that live in a particular location. Now, I don't know if you guys will know the trivia question I have for you, but I want to remind you that every question I ask you, there's a reason for it. We talked about biomes the other day, tundras, deserts, all that stuff. Do you know what biome has the greatest biodiversity on Earth, Maggie? A tropical rainforest. How about in the ocean? Coral reef. A coral reef is like the rainforest of the ocean. Very good. I would I don't know for sure, but I'm venture to say a desert has the lowest biodiversity. It simply is how much life there is, or let me rephrase that, how much different life there is. Whenever species go extinct in a biome or an ecosystem, the biodiversity is reduced, and it's not good. The more diversity you have, the better. The more biodiversity an area has, the healthier it is. Let me give you an example here. Africa has lions and leopards, and they're both big cats. But if you ever saw them side by side, guys, you'd be astonished at how much bigger a lion is than a leopard. They're a lot bigger. But they both had the same niche. They both are the top predator. So here's what I'm getting at. If there was some disease that wiped out leopards, leopards are gone from Africa. The ecosystem's probably going to be okay because there's another animal that is the top predator, a lion. Okay? However, what would you say is across the state of Florida? Don't just think the Everglades. Across the state of Florida, what is the top predator? Alligators. There's nothing that replaces them here. If you're thinking Florida Panthers, there's more. I see more students in a day than there are Florida Panthers in the wild, unfortunately. So alligators are the top predator here. There is no co-top predator in Florida. There are a few crocodiles, but nowhere near the number of alligators. If all the alligators were wiped out, there's nothing to pick up their slack. And so that's what I'm talking about biodiversity is Africa is biodiverse enough where if an animal like the leopards leaves, a lion will pick up its slack. That's good. It's very biodiverse. But if an animal like the American alligator leaves Florida, there's not a whole lot that's going to pick up its slack because Florida is not as biodiverse as Africa. It's all about can someone replace you if you leave? If you can, then you're biodiverse. If there is nothing, you're not biodiverse enough. Okay, species richness. This is the number of species that live in a certain area. In a couple weeks, you're going to learn about how humans are affecting biodiversity across the planet just through our regular activities. We are having a negative effect on it, which means we are causing species to die out. All right, the last part for today we'll be able to get in things you have we commented on a few days ago. I certainly hope you remember from when you were freshies. Is symbiosis, which is a form of interaction between two different species that isn't necessarily competition. Symbiosis is two organisms are partnered with each other. If you're a Marvel comic fan, Venom, Venom, Venom. That is a symbiotic relationship between a human and an alien. Now, the first kind is mutualism. In AP Bio, we represent mutualism as positive/positive. It is a win-win situation. Both organisms benefit from each other. You guys have bacteria that live in your intestines, and that's good. You need them. You provide them with a home. You provide them with food. What they do for you is that they're able to get the vitamins and minerals from the food you eat and distribute it back to you. They break it down because you can't. So it's a win-win. They're not parasitic. You need them. So here's a few examples I looked up. Oh, that poor bird. Nope. Crocodiles know the bird knows what he's doing. Crocodile gets his teeth cleaned. Bird gets a free meal. Here's Nemo and Marlin. The sea anemone is a real-life creature. The clownfish has a layer of mucus that protects it from the stinging anemone. The clownfish brings food back to its home, the anemone, and the scraps of food are eaten by the anemone. In return, the anemone protects the clownfish because these tentacles from the anemone are poisonous. It can sting other things, but clownfish have a layer of mucus on their body that prevent them from being stung. So it's a win-win situation. Number two is commensalism, which is positive/0. This means that one organism benefits, the other one doesn't care. An example of this are these remora fish. They can stick to the side of a larger animal like a shark, a dolphin, a turtle, or a whale. The larger animal doesn't care. Those fish are just hitching a ride. They don't bother the big animal. And when the big animal eats, it leaves scraps of food in the water and all the remora can eat it. Then the third one, parasitism, positive/negative. One member, one organism, I should say, benefits by harming the other, like a dog and fleas. That's a parasitic relationship. The bacteria that grows in your mouth overnight while you're sleeping gives you morning breath. So here's a few examples. Mosquito. And here's one you may have never known of. This parasite is a louse. It crawls through the gills of a fish, goes in the fish's mouth, grabs onto the fish's tongue, cuts the fish's tongue off, and replaces the fish's tongue with itself. So whenever the fish eats, the parasite eats. Pretty nasty. There's a couple others I want you to know that may be on AP material, so here we go. Here's a tree root. I'm going to ask you, what form of symbiosis is this? This is a tree root. This is a source of water. The tree root cannot reach the water on its own. So here's what happens. There is a fungus called mycorrhizae. I think I spelled it right. It is going to wrap around the roots of the tree. Now, this is where you really need to think. It wraps around the roots of the tree and it extends the reach of the tree roots to get to the water. Now, when it wraps around the tree, guys, it can actually go through the tree root, like piercing it. The tree gets water from this relationship. The fungus will eat sugar from the tree's roots. What kind of symbiotic relationship is this? You might think it's mutualism, and on an FRQ, that is an acceptable answer, but you have to explain why. You say the tree is getting water and the fungus is getting sugar. However, think about this. The root is being stabbed. It doesn't have a lot of choice. So this could be considered parasitism too, because the root is unwillingly giving up its sugar, just like a dog is unwillingly giving up his blood to a tick. So if you put mutualism or parasitism, you would be on the right track. You would just have to explain why or how. So how about your explanation? Okay,